Hello and welcome to another episode of the SpotOn Spotlight podcast. I'm Ian Murray, the president of SpotOn Productions. I'm excited for our guest today. It's a gentleman I've met fairly recently, but we connected really quickly and have had a lot of really great conversations over the last few months. He left his former agency and went out and started the entrepreneurial journey on his own. I'm excited to introduce you to Scott Sutter. Thank you, Scott, for joining me today.
Pleasure is all mine, Ian. Thank you so much for the invitation. Looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely. So, Scott, tell me a little bit about your business, kind of this new role that you're in, and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, great question. So as you mentioned, I began the entrepreneur's journey, the entrepreneur climb, if you will, just a couple of months ago. So I had worked for the same digital marketing agency here in Cincinnati for about 7.5 years. And ultimately always had kind of a desire to start my own business. Never really knew what it was, going to be in. And then I was kind of put in a position where that was sort of something I had to figure out pretty quickly. And so I was able to take the success from working at that agency, what I understood about digital marketing, kind of the consultative aspect of the role that I was in there, and then sort of bring that over into my own business. And so I'm the founder, sales rep, producer, content writer, link builder, all of the things. So technically my role is quite vast right now, but I'm excited about the opportunity to scale this business and hopefully kind of zero in on the things that I think, uniquely gifted at. So
That's very cool. So, getting into kind of what we're talking about today. So, a lot of people say SEO is dead, but you really believe in the space of kind of how AI is changing that. From your perspective, is what's that look like? Is SEO dead, and is it still alive? What's valuable kind of in that space?
yeah, it's a phenomenal question. So it's kind of like, the way that I sort of equate it is like during the Industrial Revolution, it'd be like saying, oh, work is dead now that people are doing it differently. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like people stopped farming and they started working in cities, and the world evolved and it changed. And
Yeah.
people still worked and they still made a living. They still ate food. They still, needed, healthcare and things along those lines. And the same's true today. People still go to the internet and they still search for things. They use maybe a different channel, a different mechanism to do so. But SEO, the concept of search engine optimization, which is what SEO stands for, may be evolving in the sense that like people are no longer using what they would maybe classify as search engines. They're using different tools to do that. Now, the mechanics of how these different tools are ultimately gathering information and providing that information to the end user is still very, very similar. It's just doing it with a lot more intuition, and it's doing it with a little bit more processing than it used to. So no, I would not argue that search engine optimization is dead by any stretch. I would say that it is certainly evolving. I think the nature of why search engines are so important is there was a need for people to discover information and to find what they were looking for, and now they're doing that slightly differently. So we're calling it slightly different things, but the nuts and bolts of what drove SEO and search engine optimization are very, very similar today to what they've always been.
And that goes great into the next question I have for you. So you've got new names for it. So you talk about kind of these two emerging concepts, answer engine optimization and then generative experience optimization.
Yep.
Kind of big words. Can you break those down, kind of explain what they are and why they matter for businesses today?
100%. Yeah. So again, there are some additional ones that people might throw out there. You might hear AI optimization. You might hear, just some other kind of fancy LLM optimization, some other fancy acronyms out there. But ultimately, the nature of answer engines and generative experience are when somebody is going to a platform and they're asking it some level of question, they're seeking some level of information. Sometimes that information is static, and sometimes that information is curated. Right? I'm going to go ask. The analogy or the example that I like to use is, hey, how far is the Earth from the sun? That answer might change on a day-to-day basis given where we are in sort of the globe circling of the sun. But there is a specific answer, no matter who you are, where you are, there is an answer to that question that is static, more or less. If I go to, not that, this is just a completely hypothetical, non-related question. But if I go to Google and I say, I'm 35 years old and it hurts when I wake up every morning and I put my feet on the ground, what should I do to fix that problem? Again, speaking completely objectively.
Absolutely.
It's going to potentially curate a response to me given who I am and maybe some of my exercise practices or height or weight or age or, fill in the blank, right? So when you think about answer engine versus generative experience, what you're ultimately trying to appeal to is I want to be found for the static answer, or I want to be found for a curated response that these individuals or these end users might be going and looking for. And there are different categories and verticals that sort of breaks into, but those are the general concepts. Answer engine is static, and then generative experience is more curated around details and variables that a user might be typing in.
That's crazy. So how is AI then reshaping SEO? So how do we use AI to show up in those places, and how is it maybe making it cheaper, faster, or more accessible to small business? Because
Yeah.
small businesses want to tap into this AI trend, but it can be so overwhelming.
That's right. Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's something that unfortunately there is sort of the same Achilles heels that apply today that have always applied. Somebody might say something along the lines of like, "Oh, I can use AI for my marketing." Well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT what I should do for marketing. It's like, okay, um, that's again similar in concept to some people use a motor vehicle to race around a track 250 times as fast as they possibly can and come in first place, and some people use it to go to the UDF that's a mile down the road. There is a nature of how you use AI and what you use it for, and then ultimately how you appeal to it. That I think there's with a lack of information, a lack of understanding, you might try to do it and fail, and then kind of assume, oh well, it's impossible, or oh well, it won't work for our business, or something along those lines. When in reality, understanding how AI processes information, how it kind of presents information, and then ultimately how to use it to appeal to those different kind of practices, all of that is important as you kind of take this step into this age of marketing. So it's reshaping it in that it is making it more accessible. It's making it more, I'd say, the term easier is probably the wrong term to use. It's making it much more efficient. You can get things quicker, but at the end of the day, like, we have not reached the point yet where you can sort of like close your eyes and give the nuclear launch codes to AI and
Just
trust it
go
to do
with
what.
it.
That's right. We haven't really reached that point yet. It can do some cool stuff, and if you're on Instagram, if you're on social media, you can see, it can reskin a basketball player as a South Park character, and that character can dunk the ball and do something kind of funny. But it can't really go out and get you 1,000 new clients just yet.
Okay. So for local service-based businesses like a plumber or a lawyer, a contractor, those people you need to find, um, why does SEO still matter to those businesses even in an AI era?
Yeah, great question. If you Google search a service-based keyword, right? So people still use Google. Google is still a
Mm-hmm.
widely accepted and trusted source of information. If you Google search a service-based search, something related to a geography, related to a service, related to I've got a problem, I need a solution for it as quickly as possible, you typically are not going to get an SGE, which stands for Search Generated Experience, which is the AI response that Google is going to provide in a lot of different contexts and capacities. You're going to get paid ads and a Google map and organic results more often than not. Now you can go to AI mode, but most of the time it's not going to push that AI SGE on you for a for a service based or geographic service based search term. So why search still matters, why SEO still matters for those businesses is because if I've got a flooded basement, I need to call somebody right now. I don't want to go to ChatGPT and say, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and this is how old my house is, and this is how many kids I have, and this is XYZ, and my basement's flooded. Who should I call? It's like, no, I'm calling the first 5 people I find, and if 2 of them answer and the other 3 don't, I'm going to go with one of those 2 that picks the phone up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So traditional marketing efforts and traditional digital efforts are still super important for those types of local businesses. Now, the mechanisms to generate visibility, we've been, when I was at my previous agency, we did this for years, and other SEO companies either just don't have the capacity or the foresight to do it, or it's an expensive solution. You have to have the vision to even sort of pitch it and market it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a local business and you can service, here, let's say in greater Cincinnati, you can service 12 different areas, neighborhoods, and by that I mean Westchester and Milford and Anderson, and maybe on the west side you got like Hamilton and Fairfield and some of those other areas. If you can service those different markets, then you need more than a homepage that says Cincinnati lawyer, Cincinnati plumbing company, Cincinnati lawn care. You need individual pages for those individual markets. Now, this is going to start to bridge that gap between SEO and GEO, the generative experience. Now, by creating local pages for each of those different services in each of those different markets, when somebody inside that geography searches for lawn care near me, you have a local page oriented to the IP address of where they're actually searching from. So this is a strategy that appeals to Google when it's trying to connect the dots from a local perspective on a near me type term, or if it knows that the search that you're punching in by default is a geographic related term. Meaning, if I search haircut, I'm not looking for something that's in Oklahoma. I'm looking for something that's within 5 to 10 minutes of driving from where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
So Google can you don't even have to type the near me or the Cincinnati or the Hamilton County or the whatever. You just type in pizza, restaurant. It's going to give you local results because it knows where you are. So all that to be said, from an SEO perspective, the need to create local pages with the service that you offer has always been there. You should have. This is a practice that you should have always been doing anyways. But now when people go to ChatGPT, the LLMs, Claude, ChatGPT, Perplexity, they're identifying the curated generative experience response based on that same information, based on the number of landing pages that you have on your site, the locations that you appeal to. They're doing it the exact same way Google's done it. What we don't realize is that below the surface, Google has had this sort of AI intuition around geographic search for some time now, right? It's giving me a local search term based on where I'm physically located. It's already doing that for me. We're just calling it AI now. We're calling it, something a little bit different than what we maybe understood it was doing before.
Than the old algorithm.
Right, exactly, right. So at the end of the day, like, these two systems operate very, very similarly, basically based on the input that your website ultimately has. So when people say, back to your original question, is SEO dead? The answer is, we're just calling it something slightly different. You still need to build out your strategy the same way that we've always encouraged people to build it out. Kind of canvas what you want to be found for, canvas the information and the geographies and the services that you offer. Now LLMs are picking that information up and they're skinning it as a curated response, as opposed to like, here are the 10 pages that you should consider going to based on the search term that you made. It's actually writing the answer for you. So it's skinning it a little bit differently, but it's still pulling the information the exact same way it's always done it.
So are there tips to show up in that AI response more often than not? I mean, what are AI search features looking for in that generative experience?
Yes, that's a phenomenal question. So there are ways to structure and build out your content that appeal better to LLMs, that do actually encourage those LLMs to pick up the information that's on your website, and display that at a higher capacity than other landing pages that aren't doing it that way. One of the first ways to do that is obviously to have a breadth of information, a wide breadth of information on your website about the topics that you want to be found for. We call this knowledge-based trust in the SEO space. When it comes to LLMs, I'm sure they're going to coin a different term, but it's the same capacity that the more information you have that an LLM can gather information from, the more trust it's ultimately going to assign to your website. So what that looks like is, I've always used this analogy in SEO. If you came to me and you're like, hey, you're a digital marketing expert. And I said, yep, that's right. And you're like, what should I do? I'm like, I want to start a podcast. Where do I start? And I was like, oh, I don't know anything about podcasting. It's like, well, then maybe you're not a digital marketing expert. Maybe you're an SEO expert, right? So the same thing is true for your website. If Google comes to your website and you're like, hey, we do video production, we're experts in video production, and then it doesn't find any more information on your website, well, it's not going to trust that you actually have the knowledge that somebody's going to need to where Google is going to send people to your website, right? Google, at the end of the day, Google is trying to send people to the most appropriate website the most appropriate information that end user is looking for. And now
Mm-hmm.
that's what LLMs are doing too. That's what AI is trying to do. It's trying to give you the best information possible. Because if I go to Claude and I ask Claude a question and it gives me a terrible answer, where's the next place I'm going? The
Not
next
Claude.
place I'm going is ChatGPT, right?
Yep.
Or Perplexity. So if these LLMs don't continue to evolve and get better and better and better and give me better and better answers, well, then I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to go to a new one. I'm going to, go back to Google. So just like Google's always tried to give me the absolute best information, so I don't go to Bing and I don't go to DuckDuckGo and I don't go to, Yahoo.com. That's exactly what the LLMs are ultimately going to try to do too. And in order to give me the best possible answer, it has to trust the source of the information it's providing, right? Like the biggest thing that people don't recognize or understand at times about Google or these LLMs is that, like, there's not some big mega computer somewhere that has all of the world's information in it, that's in a closed source that these LLMs pull from. No, they pull from public information. They pull from public sources of data, especially when it comes to, like, popular culture and things that happened yesterday, like things that are actively happening, ultimately right now. So it has to pull from a source of truth that it can trust. And so one way to appeal to SEO and AEO and GEO is to create more content relevant to your business or the information that you want to provide, right?
Yeah.
If you do lawn care, you should write information about lawn care. You should talk about what type of grass should you use in Minnesota. Like that is a weird thing to think through and to consider, but the more kind of content you publish, in that regard, the more knowledge-based trust you're ultimately going to be able to kind of accumulate to your website. Now, again, that's a little off cuff and a little hypothetical, but the concept is still true. You have to think through how can I establish trust and establish trustworthiness from Google and from the LLM's perspective. So that's the first thing is creating the content that's relevant to your business.
Makes sense.
The second thing is now you're seeing more of what's called EEAT, which I always forget what one of the E's are. It's experience, expertise, trustworthiness, and authoritativeness. I had the T and the A mixed up, but EEAT. So one thing that also is important now is citations more and more in the content that you're actually publishing on your website. Citations for the author and citations for where the information ultimately came from. That will also appeal to LLMs. They want to see those citations because typically when an LLM gives you a response, it has citations in it. So if it knows where your citations are coming from, it can trust your information a little bit more. The third thing is basically kind of the concept of lists and listicles, which are, here's a list of all of the applicable, video production agencies in Cincinnati. By the way, SpotOn is the very top. We're the best. But here's another couple of other
There's a
bad
couple
ones.
others.
Yeah, right. So listicles or just having lists in the information in the content. That's also super important. And then the last thing is, and these are all just kind of like quick tips, right? Well, the first one wasn't very quick, but these last three have been kind of quick. Creating charts of information also in your content can appeal to the LLMs and give them something to kind of like grab onto and sort of display in their responses as well.
And I feel like they can read those better than the old days of just Google, where it couldn't really understand a picture or a chart, where LLMs can 100% understand those.
That's right. And that is, again, an emerging thing with AI that has been unbelievably helpful, but also sort of just unbelievable is the kind of the intuitive nature of being able to kind of piece together that type of data, that type of information. And, I'm not really like a doom and gloom kind of person. That is going to create a tremendous amount of efficiencies. Or a tremendous amount of efficiency for businesses where you may, historically have needed a couple of people crunching numbers or reviewing data. You might not need that quite as much anymore. That type of information can absolutely be kind of interpreted and kind of reconfigured and displayed, in a powerful way. And, I think it's one of the best things about AI is you can upload a spreadsheet and say, hey, give me a report, give me data points, give me some takeaways from this information. And I always say, like, use it as a calibration tool. Don't replace your own analysis. Don't replace your own thoughts and consideration. Use it as a calibration tool, but use it. Use it because it's powerful and it's intuitive and it's helpful. So yeah, that type of information, charting out, that type of stuff can also be a very powerful way to get included in LLMs.
Nice. So what mistakes do you see businesses making when it comes to SEO and that digital lead generation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when it comes to SEO, some again fatal flaws, Achilles heels that have always sort of been present are understanding kind of the technical side of SEO, understanding like how do you tether the information together so that Google actually knows how to read your website. You know, you're seeing this mass outpour now of new content and you know people that are trying to appeal on a just you know, just canvassing perspective or mentality like, hey, let me get all this content out there. That's obviously super important. It's one of the best ways to use AI. But what you're missing when you do that is you're kind of you know, you're kind of creating a helium balloon and you're letting it kind of float off on its own, right? So if
Okay.
I just decided, yeah, and I'll explain what I mean by that. The movie Up, right?
Yep.
We've got young kids in the movie Up. He floats away in his house because he got all these helium balloons that are tied together that are all tethered to the house, right?
Yep.
Well, you're not going to go anywhere if those balloons aren't tethered to anything. They're all going to float off, right? Everybody, not everybody, but most people have seen, you know, like a big parade. Everybody releases a balloon or releases a lantern or whatever. When you do that with your content, when you just write a piece of content using AI and you publish it, and okay, great, that's out there. Now let's move on to the next one. Let's do 10 today, 10 tomorrow. You know, we'll get 100 live this month. The problem with that is when that content is not structured appropriately, when it's not interlinking back and forth to other pieces of relative content, to relative information, you're either creating these sort of like islands of content, islands of information that can't pull from any equity that's anywhere else on your website,
Interesting.
or you're diluting the message across your whole website and you're not creating structure to the things that you're specifically like, you know, talking about, right? So for example, back to the digital marketing, you know, sort of kind of analogy, if you're a digital marketing person like myself and you do, you know, podcast marketing and SEO and paid advertising and email marketing and, you know, social media marketing, if you do all five of those different things, but you know, take your plate and you kind of smash all the different foods together in one plate, it's hard to sell that as a full solution. It's hard to sell that as like one thing, right? If somebody comes to you and like, well, what are you great at? It's like, well, I do it all. Okay, well then I'm going to use somebody who's great at this one thing and another person who's great at this one thing and another, you know. So when it comes to how you create content on your website, if you just write a bunch of content using AI and you publish it, well, Google can't trust that you are a source of information or a source of truth on one specific thing because it's all diluted. It's all part of the same kind of concoction, right? But when you structure silos of information on your website in a really intentional way, hey, this folder is all about SEO, and I've got 100 articles about SEO inside this folder, and they're all interlinking to each other, right? And then this folder here is about paid advertising. I've got 50 pieces of content about paid advertising. It's all interlinked to each other. And in really strategic spots, I do link my paid ads to my SEO content, to my podcast content, to my email content, really strategically and in really intentional ways. The benefit of doing it that way is you create a very understandable topical footprint for Google to know, here's how this content is structured. When you just use AI and you spam content out there, Google can't really even understand. It might be able to read the content and see, okay, you should be relevant for this term. But in order to establish knowledge-based trust, it has to know that you have like consistent knowledge on a given topic. And if you just write a bunch of content and throw it out there, and this is a mistake that I see a lot of people use, I see a lot of people make when they use AI for their content or for their marketing, they just create copy, they just throw it out. You know, the headers are all wrong. The title tags are all wrong. They're not linking to anything. They don't have any call to actions in their content. They don't have you know, specificity around their brand or their difference. They don't you know, talk about, hey, find out more in this, you know, in this vertical in our blog. It's just it just exists. It just is there, right? So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I think people make is they assume that AI can write my copy and that's all I need, right? But there's a technical element to creating that, you know, that structure. That again, it's the same mistake that people have always made with their SEO. How come my content's not ranking? Well, your header one of this landing page says solutions. Okay, well, Google search the term solutions and you tell me what shows up, right? Like if you're targeting something so broad and so vague, you're just not going to get any credit from Google for that effort because it just doesn't know what you want to be found for. It can't understand what it
Makes
should rank
sense.
you for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, that was a
Okay.
very, very
No,
long-winded
that was a
response.
very detailed answer. I like it because now
Yeah,
I'm sitting here
yeah.
like, how can we do a better job linking? Because we do content like about our process and all the things like specific so people understand what it's like. Because video is kind of this, you pull your iPhone out and you make video. Well, we do professional video, which is a little more complicated than that to write scripts, cast talent, do locations. So
Yes.
helping clients understand that through pieces of content, but we're not doing a great job linking it. So that's a good thing for me to like, how can we do this better?
Yeah.
So if a company wants to start doing better on their SEO, what would be maybe the top 2 to 3 steps that you'd recommend that they can start working on like today?
Yeah, yeah. So obviously, number one would be give me a call, right? Let's talk.
Call
Um,
Scott.
that's right. There are some tools that are starting to emerge that do try to facilitate it in a more meaningful way. So some tools that I'm already using in my business that I encourage people to use in their own business would be Search Atlas is a good one. It has a few kind of bugs to it that sometimes you kind of have to work through. It wants to kind of follow a very specific process, and if one thing sort of goes wrong, it can kind of derail. So just be a little bit cautious there. It's always good to like read content on what's called Search Engine Land, which is a publication that is going to talk in detail about what's taking place in search engines and digital marketing and SEO, AEO, GEO, what's evolving there. There are, again, AMA shows that people can go to. There are plenty of different communities that people can get plugged into at ultimately no cost. I always kind of like to relate everything back to my first job right out of college, and I did project estimating for a roofing company, and I always like to make that distinction. I was not on roofs; I was just doing project estimating. And I talked to my boss, and I said something to him to the extent of like, hey, I'm glad that I know how to put a roof on a building now, because if I ever need to put a roof on my house, I'll know how to do it. And his response was, now that you know how hard it is, you'll never do it yourself. And SEO can be very much like that. When you understand how complicated and difficult it is to get it right,
Yeah.
most of the time you're not going to want to do it yourself. You're going to want to hire somebody who already understands it, who can talk about strategy and vision and all these different things. So my recommendation for anybody out there who doesn't necessarily feel like they have a very good grip on SEO would be absolutely to talk to a specialist, to talk to somebody who offers it as a service, whether it's me or somebody else. There are a bunch of different people out there that do a very, very good job. And then my other recommendation would be, good work is expensive. Good work can be costly, and I always like to relate it back to like when you hire the best, expect to pay pricing that's associated with the best, but expect not to have to redo the work multiple times and solve the problems that come with hiring somebody who maybe is not one of the best. So those would be my recommendations on how to like find some of the information you might be looking for, some of the tools that are out there. There's also a really good tool out there called Replit that I like to use. And Replit is a very dynamic program. If you're somebody who likes to tinker, who likes to kind of, mess around with some stuff and build stuff, like I would highly recommend Replit too. It's cool.
Okay, very cool. So kind of as we're wrapping up here, you've mentioned using AI or using prompts and AI tools to quickly generate websites and blog content. We've kind of touched on that, but talk to me how that process works in a way that isn't gonna ding you or take you down the dark hole or make you a balloon that floats to nowhere.
Yeah, very good. So prompting is a massive variable in that. How do you build your prompt out? What do you ask it for? How do you then implement the output into your website? So most websites you can upload HTML as a blog, right? So one of the things that I always like to do if I'm creating content and I want it to be interlinked effectively is I will take that content and I will go to, and I'm getting specific here with you, but
that's fine.
I'll take a piece of content and I'll literally go to Claude or I'll go to ChatGPT or I'll go to Perplexity or whatever, and I'll say, I'd like this content to be recreated as HTML. I would like you to use this sitemap, and I will upload the sitemap, which you can typically find at domain /sitemap_XML, right? Like you can usually find it that way. upload that sitemap to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever. I would like it to be interlinked appropriately with at least 5 to 10 interlinks to this page. I would like it to have these call to actions that would say this thing, and I would like those call to actions to take them to this landing page.
Wow.
Please create the HTML for me. Now, you have to create the content yourself, right,
Mm-hmm.
before you actually ask it to do the HTML for you. Or you can use ChatGPT and AI to do it, to create the content. But always proof it. Always adjust it. Make it brand oriented. But then you ask AI to actually turn it into HTML for you, and now you should have a cleanly formatted HTML that you can upload directly into your website that'll fit into kind of the parameters of your theme, and it just makes the process so much faster. And again, on the back end of all that, I would stay as coordinated and sort of organized as I possibly can. So what I would maybe do is I would start like a Google Drive sheet, and I would have different tabs that talk about the different verticals of service that I offer, right? So I would have an SEO sheet, a paid ad sheet, a podcast sheet, and then as I create content, I would drop that information into those sheets and then make sure that those kind of act as my source of truth of how to actually stay, ultimately appropriately interlinked throughout the course of, my entire website. There's probably a better solution out there. There's probably somebody out there that's like, I wrote a code or a script to do that automatically. It's like, okay, that's great. I'm glad that you did that. I'm a father of 5 kids and I don't have time to learn how to code, the old fashioned way. But long story short, that's how I would do it. Is I would ask AI to support. Now that I know, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, interlinking, I didn't even think of that. It's like, right, now that you know, take those things that you're aware of and ask AI to include those in what you're trying to do, right? You can also start with a prompt that's like, hey, I have an XYZ business that I'm looking to improve the SEO on. What are the 10 things, if I were a top level SEO person, what are the 10 things that I would start with? Get a response and say, okay, great. Factoring all of those things in or thinking through all those different things, can you create for me an article and then create a version of it in HTML for me to review that follows those best practices for this keyword, and ask it to write a piece of content for you for that keyword, right? So again, it's really kind of thinking through how can I use this almost as a sounding board, right? And kind of relay and sort of volley some stuff off of it until you get what you want, which might take some time. But once you get what you want, it should create a tremendous amount of efficiency on the back end.
I found, like you said, prompt engineering really, what you put in the front gives you the much better results on the end. The better job you can define and tell it what you're looking for,
that's
the
right.
better. It's like garbage in, garbage out. If you start with bad stuff, it's going to only give you bad stuff.
That's exactly right. And ultimately what I'll do is I will, and now we're just talking about AI hacks, which I love, but what I'll do is I'll tinker until I get exactly what I want. And then I will say, please give me the prompt to get this from you again, to get this exact sort of output from you in a different channel or a different chat or something like that. So that's another little hack that you can say is like, now that we've gotten where we want to go, how do I prompt you to get this exact thing? That's right. So
the last quick question for you, just because I know you love podcasts and we're doing a podcast. Yeah. Why are podcasts such a great fit for SEO strategy?
Ooh, that's a good question. So the reason I love podcasts in general is because it's the maximum leverage on your time from a marketing standpoint. So I have a kind of a separate arm of my business that focuses on podcast marketing is kind of what I call it, podcast marketing. And conceptually what it is it's taking 2 people or multiple people or even sometimes a single person and taking the conversation that they have, turning it into written copy, and then taking that copy and turning that copy into as many marketing outputs as you ultimately can, in addition to the video outputs, in addition to the audio outputs, right? So if you think about how people consume content, they consume it typically through video, audio, or written, right? Mm-hmm. So with a podcast, you ultimately can check all of those boxes. If I write a blog, I can't turn that blog into a video. You can now with AI, but
it's not great. It's still got a lot. It's got a lot of room to go.
That's right. Or it's going to be, I guess you could create some lovable characters that are sitting there recording a podcast. But it makes a little bit more sense for you and I to spend 40 minutes talking and sharing our subject matter expertise and laughing and smiling at each other and XYZ, because now it'll appeal better on basically on a social media post In addition to that, people that are driving in their car, if they're like, hey, I'm really bought into the SpotOn, podcast, so I'm going to listen to every episode as I'm driving in my car. Okay, well, I don't have to look at anything. I can just listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, people that, want to consume bite-sized pieces of information or kind of the long format. Now we can publish a blog or a couple of blogs with a transcript. We can ask AI, hey, turn this into a couple of blogs for me. We can also ask AI to take that transcript and turn it into 20 LinkedIn posts or 2 newsletter emails or, fill in the blank. Yeah. So what I do is I start with this long format marketing input once per month or twice per month. And that marketing input becomes the engine for all of my posting. It becomes the engine for all of my marketing effort, right? So I don't have to go to a marketer and say, hey, just come up with an idea for me this month that I can lean into. You have a podcast once a week or once every 2 weeks. Now you can take whatever the topic from that podcast is, and you can ultimately turn that into your social media calendar. You can turn that into supplemental social media posting. You can turn it into your LinkedIn posting, your newsletter, all kinds of different stuff. So it's specifically from a search engine standpoint. If you think about the application to search engines, people are going to be going to search engines and searching things, and they might get YouTube things that pop up. They might get LLMs, SGEs, or search generated experiences. They might get organic results. They might get XYZ, whatever shows up in a search engine when you type in a specific search term. So if you think about SEO, you can take this conversation and you can turn it into marketing outputs that a search engine hypothetically could grab and present to somebody when they actually search something specifically. So the reason I love podcasting in general is, one, I talk too much, as we all are well aware now. But two, it's because now there's maximum leverage on a conversation that is natural, that is free flowing, that is comfortable, that's fun, that can be used in whatever capacity we ultimately need it to be used in to kind of get the message across.
That's great. And I like all those things, and I also like the relationship side of it. I like having a conversation with somebody else that's similarly aligned, that helps bring benefit to their business, brings benefit to our business, and there's some of that crossover. So,
and that sort of is the intangible that you kind of have 2 schools of people that think about podcasts. You have the school of people that are like, I'm going to be famous when I do my podcast, right? That's great. We want to get as much maximum visibility as we possibly can. Then you have the school of thought and the school of people that do a podcast for the tactical, one-to-one relational selling aspect, right? If I have somebody who I really want to sell to as a guest on my podcast, now I can build a relationship with that person. In worst case scenario, I can add them to my network, and I can make sure that I touch base with them once a month when I record a new episode of my podcast, and I send them a newsletter or whatever. So podcasting is so powerful in the capacity that's like, hey, if I'm going to get you visibility with my audience, and you have an audience, and you can get me some visibility with your audience, well, it's mutually beneficial. And now we have people that we've been able to sort of build that natural, comfortable relationship with, where in the past, if I call somebody out of the blue and I'm like, hey, you're a successful father who might be a Christian, who XYZ, they might be like, yeah, I don't have time to talk to you. I'm not really interested. I always like to joke. I did lose my father years ago. I don't like to joke about that, but I like to joke that, like, asking somebody in business to be your mentor is kind of like asking them to be your father, right? It's kind of like, hey, will you mentor me? They're kind of like, I don't know. It always feels really goofy, but being able to do a podcast episode with somebody allows you to sort of build up that natural kind of relationship with people, and I do really appreciate that. It's always fun.
Excellent. There's been a lot of good stuff today. So, kind of one of my favorite questions to ask at the end of a podcast is, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Oh, that is a phenomenal question. The best piece of advice I think I've received on business, and it's one that I'm still trying to perfect, and by perfect I mean, even begin the process of pursuing, is basically, when you are really good and really helpful, success will find you. When you do great work, and when you are helpful and genuine and likable and curious, and you add value to the people that are around you, then success has a way of finding you. And I just think that that's incredibly profound, right? We spend a lot of our time stressing over business, and how do I get more, and how do I grow, and how do I find, and I think at the end of the day, when you get to the end of your career, and when you get to the end of potentially even life, if you look back and you're like, man, I helped more people than people I sold. I don't know. I think that's going to be a really fulfilling way to reflect on life. So that's what I'm after. I'm out here hopefully trying to help more people than I'm selling to. So
I like that. That's nice. That's very deep and forces you to think about like how am I building relationships today to make sure that yes, I'm being successful, but I'm helping other people be successful as well.
that's right, man. That's right.
Well, Scott, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you? If they need some SEO help, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, great question. So one kind of odd variable of how I'm marketing myself is I am sort of niching into law firms as of very, very recently. I've made the decision to do that. I've historically helped companies on an agnostic basis, meaning it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I'm happy to work with you, happy to help out in whatever capacity that I ultimately can. There is some truth to that still, but I want to actively market to law firms because they kind of need the best and the most of all of the things that we've talked about today. They have a local presence, they have a really competitive field, and ultimately it's about kind of creating as much visibility as they possibly can. And there's a really substantial need to add like supplemental supporting content to ultimately what they want to be found for, no matter what the practice area is. So that's sort of who I'm openly, actively marketing towards. eastymarketinggroup.com is my website. And then you can catch me at scott@eastymarketinggroup.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. And then I also, as we talked about, I do sort of have, I do have a separate vertical to my business for podcast creation. So it's called Creating a Podcast. You can find that at creatingapodcast.com and
tough.
Scott at creatingapodcast.com. That's right.
Awesome. Scott, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I'm definitely going to have to go think about the linking aspect because that's one thing that I don't think we've done a good job with that structure. So it definitely gives me something good to think about.
That's right, man.
Appreciate your time, man. And hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Perfect. Appreciate you so much, Ian.
Thanks, Scott.